Stories never heard before. The weight of the mountain. The mountain had always been there, looming over the horizon. Its ridges cut the sky like jagged teeth, its slopes covered in forests that whispered with wind. For generations, people had lived in its shadow, both fearing and revering it. The elders spoke of the mountain as if it were alive, a spirit that demanded respect. Children grew up hearing tales of its moods, how it could be gentle, offering streams and fertile soil, or wrathful, sending storms and avalanches. But for Arjun, the mountain was not a symbol, it was an obstacle. Arjun was 23 when the landslide came. It was sudden, a roar of earth and stone, that swallowed half the settlement in minutes. Houses crumbled, streets vanished, and lives were lost. Arjun's family home was among them. He survived only because he had been working late, at the carpentry shed on the far side. When he ran back, breathless and desperate, he found nothing but rubble, where his mother and younger sister had once lived. The air was thick with dust, screams, and silence all at once. He stood frozen, unable to comprehend that the world he had known was gone. The grief was unbearable. For weeks, Arjun wandered through the ruins, numb, unable to eat or sleep. He heard the whispers of neighbors. "He's broken," they said. "He won't recover." And perhaps they were right. He felt hollow, as though the landslide had buried, not just his family, but his future. Every morning, he woke with the weight of absence pressing on his chest, and every night, he lay down with the same emptiness gnawing at him. The mountain seemed to mock him, its silent bulk a reminder of what it had taken. Yet one evening, as Arjun sat among the wreckage, he noticed a child trying to lift a fallen beam. The boy's face was streaked with dirt, his hands trembling, but he kept pushing. Arjun recognized him, Prabal, the son of the baker. His parents had died in the landslide too. The boy looked at Arjun and said, "If we don't rebuild, we'll have nothing." His voice was thin, but it carried a truth that pierced Arjun's despair. Something shifted inside Arjun. He realized that grief was not the end, it was the beginning of a choice. He could remain buried in despair, or he could rise, carrying the weight of loss as fuel. That night, Arjun whispered to himself, "Courage is not waiting for fear to vanish. It is standing up while fear still breathes." Arjun began with small acts. He cleared debris from the streets, salvaged wood from broken houses, and built temporary shelters. His hands blistered, his muscles ached, but he kept going. At first, people watched in silence. Then, slowly, they joined him. A farmer brought tools. A seamstress stitched blankets. Children carried stones. Each act was a spark, and together they began to kindle a fragile flame of hope. Life began to stir again, though it was fragile, like seedlings pushing through cracked soil. But rebuilding was not simple. Supplies were scarce, and the mountain remained unstable. Every rumble of earth reminded them of danger. Some families left, unable to bear the risk. Arjun did not blame them. Yet he stayed, driven by a stubborn belief that recovery was possible. He told himself that leaving would mean surrendering, not only to grief, but to fear, and he refused to let fear dictate his life. He worked with a quiet intensity, his movements deliberate, his eyes fixed on the horizon, as if daring the mountain to challenge him again. One day, while inspecting the slope, Arjun discovered a fissure in the rock face. It was wide enough to swallow a man. He realized that unless they reinforced the mountain, another landslide could destroy everything again. The task seemed impossible. He was no engineer, no geologist. But he remembered his father's words, "Resilience is not knowing how, it is refusing to stop until you learn." Those words became his compass. He sought knowledge wherever he could. He studied old maps, spoke with travelers, and experimented with barriers of timber and stone. His first attempts failed, The walls collapsed, the trenches filled with mud. Villagers shook their heads. "He's chasing dreams," they muttered. But Arjun persisted. Each failure taught him something new, and each lesson became another stone in the foundation of his resolve. Months passed. Slowly, Arjun's designs improved. He built terraces to redirect water, reinforced slopes with timber, and planted fast-growing trees to anchor the soil. The work was grueling, but he refused to surrender. His resilience became a beacon. People began to trust him, not because he was flawless, but because he refused to quit. They saw in him a reflection of their own buried strength, and they began to believe that survival was possible. Arjun's determination was contagious, spreading like fire through dry grass. The turning point came during the second storm season. Rain hammered the valley, rivers swelled, and the mountain groaned. Everyone feared another landslide. Arjun stood in the downpour, watching as torrents of water rushed toward the settlement. His barriers strained, timbers creaked, but they held. The mountain shuddered, yet the homes remained safe. When the storm passed, the people gathered around Arjun. Their faces were wet with rain and tears. "You saved us," they said. But Arjun shook his head. "We saved ourselves. Courage began the work, resilience carried it, and recovery belongs to all of us." From that day, Arjun was no longer just a carpenter. He became the heart of Renewal. He organized teams to rebuild homes, taught children how to plant trees, and designed new structures that could withstand the mountain's moods. The community transformed, not into what it had been, but into something stronger. The scars of loss remained, but they became part of the landscape, woven into the fabric of resilience. The settlement was no longer defined by tragedy, but by the choice to rise from it. Years later, travelers passing through would marvel at the terraces, carved into the mountain, the sturdy houses, the forests that grew thick and green. They would ask, how did this place survive such ruin? And the people would tell the story of Arjun, the young man who lost everything, yet chose to rise. His name became a symbol, not of perfection, but of persistence. Children grew up hearing his story, and parents reminded them that strength was not the absence of pain, but the courage to carry it. Arjun himself never sought recognition. He lived simply, working with wood, teaching others, and walking the mountain paths. But whenever storms came, he stood at the edge of the terraces, listening to the rumble of earth. He no longer feared it. He understood that recovery was not about erasing scars, it was about building upon them, turning wounds into foundations. The mountain had taken much from him, but it had also given him a gift, the knowledge that resilience was born in the crucible of suffering. But Arjun's journey was not only about rebuilding structures, it was about rebuilding hearts. He noticed how grief lingered in the eyes of the people, how silence often filled the air, even when laughter returned. He began to gather them in the evenings, telling stories by firelight. He spoke of his failures, of nights when he wanted to give up, of mornings when he forced himself to rise. He told them that resilience was not perfection, it was persistence. His words carried the weight of lived truth, and they became medicine for wounded spirits. Children listened wide-eyed, elders nodded slowly, and neighbors began to share their own stories. A woman spoke of losing her husband, but finding strength in caring for others. A man admitted his fear of the mountain, but confessed that Arjun's determination had taught him courage. These gatherings became rituals of healing. The community discovered that recovery was not only about rebuilding walls, but about weaving together broken spirits. Around the fire, grief transformed into connection, and silence gave way to voices that carried both sorrow and hope. Arjun's scars became symbols. The blisters on his hands, the lines on his face, the limp he carried from an accident while hauling timber, all of these were reminders that pain could coexist with strength. He never hid them. Instead, he showed them openly, teaching children that scars were not shameful, but proof of survival. He told them that every mark was a story, and every story was a thread in the tapestry of resilience. In time, the people began to see their own scars differently, not as burdens, but as emblems of endurance. One evening, Prabal, the boy who had first spoken to him after the landslide, stood beside Arjun and asked, "Will the mountain always test us?" Arjun smiled. "Yes," he said. "But that is not a curse. It is a gift. The mountain teaches us to rise, again and again. Without its weight, we would never know our strength." His words lingered in the air, carried by the crackle of fire, and the whisper of wind. The people listened, and they understood that the mountain was not their enemy, but their teacher. And so the settlement endured. Storms came, lands trembled, but the people stood firm. They had learned that resilience was not a destination, but a journey, a choice made each day. Arjun's story became theirs, and theirs became his. Together, they carried the weight of the mountain, not as a burden, but as a testament to their strength. And in that weight, they found freedom, a freedom born of scars, of persistence, of courage shared across generations, freedom that would forever be remembered as the weight of the mountain.